All right, how we doing, class? Are we having any fun yet? Well, this week we're in week 3, and for the sake of having something up on the screen, this is the email that I sent you guys last night about the use of hashtags, because we are going to talk a little bit about Twitter today. I'm going to follow the pattern what I did last week, which was I'm going to do one video with my comments in the articles and another video on responding to your questions, as opposed to having one super long video. I thought that worked out a little better. I received some positive comments about that. Speaking on that note, this is the first time I've ever done class this way, and certain things are working well, certain things may not be working well, but if they're not working well, I may not know about it. Send me a polite note on what's not working well so I can make adjustments as we go along. So I'm going to do this video today, so this is something you can watch and work when you're bored. The question video I'm probably going to get to either Saturday or Sunday, and I'll forward that along. Okay, I was prepping that yesterday. So the first article that we have here, well, before we get to the articles, let me continue with our framing. So we started off with market orientation, right? And then we shifted over to satisfaction, loyalty, and retaining existing customers. Starting this week, we get to the CRM type stuff. CRM, we get some of that flavor in this week's articles. We're going to get more of it in next week's articles. You know, I always go back and forth whether I should start the semester with the CRM material. However, I think market orientation is much more important from a strategy-wise leading into CRM, and I have a hard time talking about CRM without talking about satisfaction and loyalty, which you will see that commentary in these articles. So the first one we have here is, do you want to keep your customers forever? We have Pine, Peppers, and Rogers. Now, one thing you will notice from this article, it was written in 1995, and there are some spectacular, dated, horrible examples in here. Almost comical when you're going through them. The next thing you will notice is Joseph Pine's the first author. He's one of the mass customization guys. And when this article was written in 1995, this is when Dell was at its prime, the way Apple's at its prime now. I mean, Dell was the poster child for technology companies. They were killing it. They would not build a computer unless they had a buyer. They did not have more than 11 to 14 days of inventory at any given time. They were able to pay their bills back within 20 days of a part materials getting shipped to them because the product would already be sold. I mean, it was a fantastic model. So you see in the opening of this article, right here in the very beginning, customers, they want exactly what they want, where, when, and how. And you'll see all this language of the merging of the mass marketing and the mass production. And we have this mass customization language throughout this article, and all this one-to-one marketing article. Now, because Pine was the first author, there was much more of a mass customization flavor to this CRM type mentality. But you'll see in the second article that there's a much more, when it's just Pepper and Rogers, it's more of a just CRM without the mass customization aspect. You notice right here on the first page, right-hand column, what do we need in CRM and mass customization? A learning relationship. Hence the first articles we did in the first week. All right, as I'm skimming through, on page 105, at the right-hand side, we have a crazy example with Harmark and kiosks and customization with kiosks. Oh my gosh. We have a little blurb on the bottom of 105 here talking about the types of media, and most of them are direct. You'll see in the later articles we have in this week, I like social media that are two-way, not one-way, two-way. On page 106, we have a little commentary, a heading on the right-hand column. It says, when are learning relationships not appropriate? And they're talking about home builders and real estate brokers. You know, I can easily make a case that it's very important with real estate brokers. I can make it a case with home builders because the way people are buying and selling homes is much. But we're going to see in this article and other articles, there are scenarios when CRM is something you should spend the time and money to do versus when CRM is not worth the time and money to do. Not every B2B or B2C scenario is ripe for a CRM type philosophy. Okay? More on that. Hold that thought though. Anything else here? Oh, on page 110 we have more terrible examples. Online services, CD-ROM catalogs, fax response systems. Yeah, that's terrible. On page 112, top right, we see a reference to Joseph Pine, making mass customization work. You have to remember that at this part of the 90s, in this type of culturally, or what was happening in the business presses, mass customization was hot. Dell was hot. Joseph Pine was writing a lot of stuff about this. We see on page 113 another interesting reference in the right-hand column about midway. Again, we see zero defections. Quality comes to services. You know, we have all these conversations that are melding together, and we keep getting referenced back to this very seminal paper about how the services, you know, how the quality movement, the TQM movement, but particularly how we started to get into satisfaction and loyalty type stuff. Finally, on the bottom of page 13, we get in this idea of customer share. It's basically the last paragraph on 113. And that's basically what CRM is. We're trying to get our existing customers to purchase more from us. We're trying to get more market share per customer. Customer share. Very good. Finally, on the last page of this article, there's some excellent examples with USAA. USAA is even better now than it was in 1995 when they were doing this. And USAA was really one of the first companies, because they had to develop a learning relationship with its customers. And because of that, USAA has expanded and is doing quite well. Like this. This sets the tone for this week, because then we have, approximately 5 years later, a more specific one-to-one marketing conversation with Peppers and Rogers. And we have another author here, Bob. Right at the beginning of the article, we have the definition. First 3 sentences. The idea is simple. One-to-one marketing, also called relationship marketing or customer relationship management, means willing and able to change your behavior towards an individual customer based on what the customer tells you and what else you should know about that customer. Now, spectacular. So what happens is industry loves buzzwords, okay? And I like to use the CRM term the most. But this one-to-one marketing term and this relationship marketing term and the CRM term have more similarities than not. We're all playing in the same sandbox, even though there's slightly different terminology. We see on the bottom of page 151, we have a reference to the article, this article. Right? So then, one other thing. Your copy might not be all that great, but in the top, you'll notice that this article says Manager's Toolkit. When Harvard Business Review does a toolkit article, it's basically a how-to article. And speaking of how-to, how do you do this CRM stuff? Starting on page 152, you identify your customers. Page 153, you segment or differentiate your customers based on heavy or light use, profitability, product lines, geography. But it's marketing 101. We segment, we differentiate. Number 3, we then interact with our customers based on their needs. Page 154, you customize your offerings towards your particular customers. Right? If we look on page 154, pretty much the last set of text before we get to the next page, it says, simply as an excuse for direct mail and telemarketing, see Susan, and David. That's the article. That's an article we're reading for next week's packets. All right, let's see. What else do we have getting here? That's very good stuff. So what are some of the upsides to doing this one-to-one CRM stuff? We're on page 156. You increase cross-selling, which means if a customer's already buying product A, you can then start selling services for product A. Or if a customer's already buying product A, you know their wants and needs, and you could start selling them product B. You reduce customer attrition. This is turnover or churn that we heard in our articles for last week. Higher levels of customer satisfaction. Again, from our articles from last week. However, you know and I know we like loyalty better than satisfaction. Reduce transaction costs and faster cycle times. What they mean by that, it's cheaper to develop relationships and to market and sell to your existing customers versus the customer acquisition costs of a new customer. And existing customers tend to buy more and more frequently than a new customer who's just trying you out. Okay? Couple last nuggets for this. I am on page 157. It's the one with Stanford here. And I'm right here about halfway down the page. And I'm going to read this because this is incredibly important. Perhaps the most valuable nugget in this whole article. When customers value of the enterprise vary widely, the top customers account for the vast majority of the business. We call this a steep skew. Steep skew. Write that down. Relationship marketing is more cost-effective for businesses with a steep skew than a shallow skew. The greater the skew, the more feasible it is for it to cultivate relationships with the most favorable customers. I.e., if the top 2% of your customers generate 50% of your profit, you can protect 50% of your bottom line by fostering learning relationships with just a few top customers. But if 20% of your customers make up 50% of your bottom line, it will be 10 times as costly to achieve the same bottom line benefit. Let me translate. If we, just like we talked about earlier in the article, if we segment our customers based on the amount of revenue they bring into our firm, and let's pretend we have 10 customers, right? We have 2 really big fish, 2 medium-sized fish, and 6 small fries, right? This is a steep skew, where you have the 2 big fish represent a very, very large percentage of overall revenues of the firm. And then you have a couple other medium fish that also are a nice sizable chunk, but 6 customers may represent only 20 or a third of your entire revenue stream. This is a steep skew. If you have a scenario like this, it is better to do CRM, because by making sure that we develop learning relationships with the big fish, and we spend a lot of time with the big fish, we're protecting ourselves because they're the majority of the revenue stream. We're going to keep coming back to this concept, so write that one down. The next pages, 158 and 159. It's a toolkit article. There's a little bit of a step-by-step process to go through. I would look at these as just from the broad headers. The actual details underneath may or may not be relevant for you. And finally, the last page of the article, I'm going to read another section right here about Amazon. As a result, Amazon is able to create the kind of learning relationships with its customers that will keep them loyal, not satisfied. It will always be at least a little easier for the customer to return to Amazon to find a book than to go somewhere else. And that explains the preference anew. This is the reason why 59% of Amazon sales come from repeat customers, roughly twice the rate of typical brick-and-mortar stores. There's not even any brick-and-mortar stores anymore for books, basically, other than Barnes & Noble. I know I'm going to get to questions in the second video, but there was a number of questions asking about what's a good one-to-one marketing firm. I'm going to keep coming back to Amazon. All right. Very good. Number 3. How valuable is word of mouth? You notice that this is another toolkit article. This is another how-to article. And you will see this is by Professor Kumar, Peterson, and Leone. I don't know these guys on an individual level, but I've been to conferences and seen them present, and I've surely have read their research. If you notice right here at the bottom of the first page, we see the article from last week, the one number you need to grow. Now, I hinted in last week's video that this article started a tidal wave, and there was a ton of research done, both in HBR and also in other marketing journals. Because even though there was a lot of research to develop the measure, people wanted to make sure it worked. Well, what was very interesting about this article is they not only measured the customer lifetime value, which this is a toolkit article. We have an explicit calculation on page 142 for CLV. We have not seen a formula at all semester. And then finally, we have a better formula for CRV. Right? These are fantastic nuggets that you basically, if you have a business similar to, if you're working at either like a telecom or a financial services firm or some kind of firm that has a customer population, you could do this. Relatively straightforward. You can develop yourself a little learning organization at work, get 4 or 5 of your buddies together, and you could do something like this without a whole lot of cash. And we're going to see that it has pretty nice rewards. Now, you notice that we see, I'm on the middle column of page 140. So right here in the middle. And we'll see that some of the statistics, one of the fantastic things about this toolkit article is they tell you exactly how they calculated and the numbers. So the telecom firm, we have 9,900 in our sample size, and the financial firm, we have 6,700. Okay? And we found out that based on the segmentation of that population, 60% of the financial firms, I'm in the middle reading this, 68% of the financial services firms' customers expressed their intention to refer. Only 33% did so. 81% of the telecom companies said that they would refer, but only 30% did. Now, the interesting thing is remember in last week's article, the question only asked, will you recommend? Right? So these authors are taking it one further. They not only asked, will you recommend? They find out through data whether they actually did or not. And then based on the ones that actually did or not, we see that only 14% of the financial services firm and 12% of the telecom firm actually generated new customers. And only 11% of the financial firm and a mere 8% of the telecom companies actually became profitable new customers. Now, these numbers may look small, but hold that thought for now. So then on page 140 and 141 and 142, we get the exact measurement of how they calculate CLV and CRV, okay? Which is referral value, customer referral value. Based on that, I'm on page 143, the one that has this big long column here. We see them create it's actually better on page 144, the customer value matrix. That based on the campaigns, they were able to, in CRV, to create categories of affluents, champions, misers, and advocates. We see on 144 over here, I'm going to read. Before the campaign started, 29% of customers fell into the affluence category. After the campaign, we found that 4% of the 9,900 sample had migrated into the champion segment, with their referral value rising an average of $190, a 388% increase. The total value of this increase is about $75,000. Now, remember, these were very small dollar amounts, $10, that they used to move these customers. And we'll see, based on these, you can do a small amount of investment with the right customer segments and get a very large financial return. Where is the... Where's the percentage here? Well, it's really on page 146. When they're talking about spending $4 a person and increasing profits overall amongst these four areas by $486,000. This is a fantastic toolkit article. You can do this. The last thing I want to say on this is I want to go back to this page here with this column and the doing-saying gap. I thought what was interesting is based on our conversation from last week, that the 9s and the 10s, the most loyal of your people, they weren't the ones that were actually the most profitable with regards to referral. If we see the CLV of the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s, and the 4s, their referral value, this is the doing-saying gap, wasn't nearly as strong as the 5s, the 6s, and the 7s. That's a little paradoxical based on what we were talking about last week. And to best of my knowledge, these are the only professors that have ever pointed that out. Okay. Now we get to our last two articles when we're working on, these are our theory articles, and these are more our application articles with regards to the week and social media. So we have here our business horizons, 2 hearts in 3/4 time, how to dance the viral marketing dance. And before I do that, I need this one. And I need... Here it is. Oh, maybe I'll grab more. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Okay, last one. Alrighty. So this article is the viral marketing article. Now, I think this is a fantastic article to introduce the topic to you. I think the authors did a pretty good job. The idea of viral means exponential growth. The way a virus grows in the body, this is the way, because we have social media, a message can be passed and grow exponentially. So we've always talked about word-of-mouth marketing in the past. But word-of-mouth marketing was always called the water cooler effect, because this is one of those deals where you're at work and you're kind of just chatting and you learn something. It was hard to measure. It was hard to induce. It was very slow. You couldn't see it. It kind of happened, but, you know. When we shift the concept of word-of-mouth marketing into the Web 2.0 world, we just happen to call it viral marketing, you know, we can actually more easily measure the impact of viral. Okay? Some quick nuggets. I'm on page 255, the bottom left-hand corner. We have, and I saw some questions about this, and I'll get back to the questions. The Dunbar number of 150 is real. There has been a lot of academic research on that number. You know, 150 plus or minus 10 people is really the uttermost limit that people have in maintaining a relationship. It doesn't even have to be a great relationship. Someone that you remember, that you see their face, you know their name, and you still know something about them, right? We may only have 3 to 6 to 9 really, really close, awesome friends that we basically could be their brother or sister. But you probably can juggle about 150, you know. Now, this was prior to us having the social media communication platforms that we have now. As much as there's 2 or 3 decades of academic research on the Dunbar number, okay, I keep wondering whether in a social networking world that the Dunbar number is too small. It's sort of like the equivalent is, you can only walk so fast. You can only run so fast as a human. But if you give me a Segway scooter, or if you give me a bicycle, I can go 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. Maybe if I'm really fast, 20 miles an hour. And maybe if I could train for the Tour de France, 25 miles an hour. So if I had technology to enable me, I bet you I can maintain more than 150 relationships. My LinkedIn account has close to 800. Not that I can go through all 800 at any given time, but I know I can manage more than 150 because I have a technology, just like the way a bike makes me go faster, that gives me the ability to manage more than 150 relationships. File that one away. All right, page 256. Here we go. Some more nuggets. We start off with 3 conditions, how to create an academic. He starts talking about this book, Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point. If you haven't read The Tipping Point, I suggest you go get a copy because everyone else already has. This is a spectacular book. You're not going to be able to put it down. This was written in a pre-Web 2.0 world. So I don't think the word internet is even in this book at all. I don't think the word social networking or electronic medium, and I know the word Web 2.0 is not in this book at all. But in this book, Gladwell starts talking about how things go viral and how you can help enable things go viral. This is one of the first viral marketing books that really tipped. Excuse me for using that. Okay. Interestingly, in here, he talks about, further down the page, market mavens, and they reference Frick and Price. Price is Linda Price. She's a very good friend of mine. She's my mentor. She is the first marketing theory professor I had. Love Linda. She's fantastic. She's the one that came up with the idea of market mavens. Okay? Now, why we're talking about, and Linda's in this book too, by the way, some other incredible viral marketing books, right? Another one that's spectacular, The Anatomy of Buzz by Emmanuel Rosen. Spectacular. This is like a toolkit book, actually. This is not a toolkit book. This is sort of like a theoretical reason why things tip and go viral. This is a how-to book. This is a toolkit book. The Anatomy of Buzz. I already mentioned this one in last week's class. I read this one this summer. Contagious, Why Things Catch On, Jonah Berger. This is more of a toolkit book. Very, very good, very common, and has a lot of Web 2.0 stuff in it. This is one of my top 5 books of all time, if not number 1. Made to Stick by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. Love this book. You cannot do viral without this. Awesome. Love it. If you only had one book to read for the next year, it should be this one. Okay. Let's go to page 258. And I like this 2x2, 1, 2, 1, 2 matrix here. The 4 groups of social media viral marketing campaigns. I like the idea that some of these are lucky. You know, it just happened by happenstance. Some of these are planned. We call them triumphs. And these books that I just recommended can help you create some triumphs. Some of them are nightmares, that you did something and you didn't mean it to go viral, but it did. And the Valentine's Day Massacre of JetBlue is a perfect example. There's another great one on YouTube, United Broke My Guitar. And this guy has, 10 million hits. He was pretty much on every morning show. He had an acoustic guitar. He loved it. United wouldn't let him carry it onto the plane. They put it underneath the plane. They smashed his guitar, created it. The baggage handlers people stacked luggage on top of the guitar. So he wrote a song about it, and it went viral. And finally, with this homemade issue and the Sony scenario, you can't be fake in a Web 2.0 world. Someone will find out. The crowd is smarter than you. The crowd will figure it out. Can't do that. What else do we have here? Anything else? Finally, at the very towards the end of the article, part 6, 6 degrees of separation. In the tipping point, they actually do a very large detail on Milgram's experiments. But the reason why we have the 6 degrees of separation expression, okay, is because of Stanley Milgram. And you can basically, they have that game, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, which basically you can take Kevin Bacon and within 6 steps, you can network him to every other person in Hollywood, right? Well, just like in my Dunbar example and the 150 number, the 6 degrees of separation number was something that was created when we didn't have anything technology-wise to support us. In this book that I read this summer, The Startup of You, Reid Hoffman, he's the founder of LinkedIn. He doesn't think because of with electronic means, you never have to go more than 3 degrees anymore. And he does a nice chapter on the difference between the 6 degrees of separation and now in electronic means there's only 3 degrees of separation. All right. And finally, I hope you watch this. Let's see. I'm just going to play 10 seconds of it.
Hey, Justin, what's up?
Not much, Jimmy. Hashtag chillin'. What's up with you?
Been busy working. Hashtag rise and grind. Hashtag is it Friday yet?
Hey, check it out. I brought you some cookies. Hashtag homemade. Hashtag oatmeal raisin. Hashtag show me the cookie.
This is the link I showed you yesterday. Go watch it on your own. It's actually very good. So I wouldn't call this last article, What Makes a Great Tweet, a toolkit article. But, you know, I thought it was useful nonetheless. Plus it was short, and I'm sure you appreciated a short article. You know, if I were to say anything about Twitter, is that Twitter is not email. Okay? If you miss a message, it's not that big of a deal. If Jimmy Fallon were to tweet 30 messages a day and none of them were directed exactly at you and you missed them, so what? If there is something important on Twitter about you, chances are your Twitter, you know, you will get notified that someone's talking about you. You know, someone's tweeting at you. But I thought this was interesting. What makes a great tweet? So these three professors, they started off with a very, very large database of almost 44,000 tweets. They reduced them down to 8 categories, and these are the 8 categories that we see. I'm surprising that 36% of tweets are ones that are worth reading. I would have put it much lower than that. I probably would have put it about like 20%, to be honest with you, prior to reading this article. You know, most of the stuff on Twitter just doesn't have a half-life. It just disappears. You know, here's the don't overuse hashtags, and this video that we have here on screen shows you that yes, they sound ridiculous. What I do want to point out to you guys, though, is, you know, they have this article. If you didn't have it stapled, it goes like this: the best and worst of tweets. You know, the best is only 36%. The worst is 30%. There's not much variance between those. You know, 36% say it's worth reading. 30% say it's worth reading. And guess what? You know, that's only a 6% difference. You know, there's not that much variance here. What can I say about Twitter? I'm going to get to more of this in the questions because you guys ask a lot of questions. But, you know, I want you to think about Twitter as immediacy. And the better you can have a conversation with someone on Twitter. The last thing you want to do is use Twitter like PR or advertising where you're just sending messages one way and don't expect dialogue from anyone. You know, the idea with Twitter is for you to listen to the conversation, what's going on out there, and for you to make a contribution based on what other people are saying. And if someone says something you like, you have a conversation with them that this is what I like. If someone is out there talking smack, well, we see on Twitter that people put them down. Not put them down, but try to correct them. And the whole Miss America thing is exactly a case in point. Okay. I'm good for this week's articles. In a day or so, I'm going to create another video with regards to our questions, okay?
Sweet. Hashtag don't mind if I don't. Pretty good. Hashtag getting my cookie on. Hashtag I'm the real cookie monster. Hashtag no. Delicious.